She stood up for a stranger, and her whole town turned against her until 200 bikers rolled in. Naomi Carter ran a small diner on the corner of Main Street. It wasn't much, just a few booths, some chipped coffee mugs, and an old cash register that stuck half the time out. It was hers, and it used to be her father's before the stroke left him silent in a hospital bed. Naomi was only in her 20s, but she carried the weight of a whole family business on her back. Every morning she opened before sunrise, wiped down the same counters, poured the same burnt coffee, and prayed just enough customers would show up to keep the lights on one more week. That day started like any other. The diner was nearly empty. The same 2 truckers sat in their usual booth, and the fan above the counter squeaked like it always did. Naomi was tired, but she smiled anyway. That's what she did. What she didn't know was that someone was about to walk through the door, a man most people in her town wouldn't even look in the eye. She'd have to choose between doing what felt right and doing what would keep her safe. And once she made that choice, nothing in her life or her town would be the same. This is the story of a woman who did the right thing when it was hardest, and what happened when the world noticed. The breakfast rush was over, not that it ever felt like much of a rush these days. Naomi Carter wiped the counter for the 3rd time that morning, more out of habit than need. The diner was quiet again. Outside, the streets were nearly empty, just like they'd been for months now. Businesses had shut down one after another, the factory first, then the hardware store, and now it felt like Carter's diner might be next. Naomi glanced over at the old cash register and did the math in her head. The tips from the farmers and truckers wouldn't be enough to cover the electricity bill, let alone the rising cost of her dad's medicine. He'd been in the hospital ever since the stroke, and every day the expenses piled higher. She left Atlanta to come back to Willow Creek to take care of the diner, to take care of him, to hold on to something that mattered. But this place, once warm and full of life, felt like it was fading. Still, Naomi kept going. She showed up, opened the doors, and served whoever came in with a quiet kind of pride. It was the same place where she'd watched her father cook eggs with one hand while fixing the fridge with the other. She wasn't going to let it die without a fight. But what she didn't know yet was that her hardest fight wasn't going to be about bills or empty booths. It was going to be about standing up for someone no one else would. The bell above the diner door gave a soft jingle, and Naomi looked up, expecting one of the regulars or maybe someone lost off the highway. But the man who stepped inside wasn't. From around here, anyone could tell that right away. He was big, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy black leather jacket that had clearly seen years of dust and road. His beard was rough and gray, and tattoos climbed up both arms like stories she didn't know how to read. But what made the room go silent was the patch on his back, a skeleton holding a scythe. Hell's Angels. Even the word made people shift in their seats. One woman near the window clutched her purse tighter. A farmer in the corner stopped drinking his coffee. Naomi could feel the whole room watching, holding its breath. The biker didn't look at anyone. He walked to the stool at the end of the counter, far from everyone else. It sat with a quiet kind of weight, like he was trying to take up less space. Naomi's heart beat a little faster. She didn't know this man. She didn't know what kind of past he carried. But she remembered her father's voice. Everyone deserves a seat at the table, no matter what patch they wear. She grabbed a menu and a glass of water, forced her voice steady, and walked over. "Welcome to Carter's," she said. The man looked up, and in his tired eyes, Naomi didn't see danger. She saw someone holding on by a thread. The door opened again, and this time the sound felt different, sharper, heavier. Naomi didn't have to look to know who had walked in. She could feel it in the air. It went quiet, like everyone inside had just stopped breathing for a second. Officer Dean Harper stepped through the doorway, his shiny boots tapping across the tile like he owned the place. Right behind him was Deputy Laura Miles, trying to look relaxed but clearly uncomfortable. Dean spotted the biker right away. His smile wasn't friendly. Naomi kept her eyes on the counter, hoping this would pass quickly. But Dean didn't come for coffee. He leaned on the counter, staring down the biker like he was waiting for him to slip up. "Don't see many of your kind around here," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The biker didn't respond, just took a sip of his coffee. Naomi felt her jaw tighten. Dean started pushing, asking for ID, making comments about gangs and drugs, dropping hints, like he was fishing for a reason to cause trouble. The biker moved slowly, carefully, reaching into his jacket. But Dean's hand was already near his gun. That's when Naomi stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. "He's done nothing wrong. He's a customer. Dean turned toward her, surprised, maybe even a little amused. You're making a mistake, he said. Naomi didn't flinch. Then his mind a make. She could feel every eye in the room on her, but she also felt something else. Her father's voice in the back of her mind, reminding her that doing the right thing doesn't always feel safe. It just feels right. By the time the biker left, the diner felt colder somehow. Naomi watched him go, then turned back to the counter and started wiping it down again, not because it was dirty, but because she didn't know what else to do with her hands. The few customers who were still there didn't say much. They paid quickly and left even faster, and after that, nobody came in at all. Not for lunch, not even for coffee. That night, as Naomi locked up, she noticed something taped to the front door. A torn piece of cardboard with thick red letters. No biker lovers. No troublemakers. Her chest tightened. She ripped it down and crumpled it in her fist. But the words stuck to her anyway. She didn't sleep much that night. Later, she sat at her father's bedside in the quiet hospital room, holding his hand and whispering like she used to when she was a little girl and couldn't sleep. I might have messed up, she said softly. People are talking. Some think I took the wrong side. Maybe I did. She paused, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, the machines clicking gently beside him. But he wasn't looking for a fight, Dad. He was just a man, tired and scared, same as anyone would be if their kid was in a hospital bed. She looked down at her father's hand and held it tighter. You always told me to treat people how they act, not how they look, and I did. I just don't know if it was enough. In her heart, she already knew the answer. It was enough, even if it cost her everything. The next morning, Naomi opened the diner early like always. She flipped the sign to open, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and sat behind the counter, staring out at the quiet street. Hours passed. No one came, not the regulars, not even the delivery guy who usually brought the bread. By noon, she had already wiped the tables twice and was considering closing early when the bell above the door finally rang. Two strangers stepped inside, a man and a woman, both in their 50s. The man was tall, with sun-worn skin and tired eyes. The woman had long gray hair pulled into a braid, a denim vest covered in patches, and the kind of face that made you feel safe. Naomi stood up quickly, unsure of who they were or what they wanted. Naomi Carter, the man asked. She nodded slowly. I'm Roy. This is my wife, Linda, Hank's brother. Naomi's shoulders dropped just a little. Roy reached out and shook her hand, warm and firm. Hank told us what happened, Linda said. He wanted to come himself, but he's still at the hospital with Jesse. Naomi's face softened. How is she? Still fighting, Roy said. Stage 4. They're trying something new. Might be their last shot. Naomi didn't know what to say. He also told us you stood up for him when nobody else would. Linda added, said you saw the man, not the jacket. Naomi gave a small shrug, but Linda smiled. We wanted to thank you. Not with money, with support. Naomi tilted her head. Support. Roy smiled gently. Give it a few minutes. At first, it was just a sound, a low rumble in the distance, like faraway thunder. Naomi stepped out from behind the counter, unsure if she was imagining it. But then it grew louder, steady, powerful. She walked to the window and looked out. Her breath caught in her throat. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. Chrome shining in the sun. Engines growling as they filled the street in front of her diner. They kept coming, one after another. Riders with leather jackets, patches, helmets. Some held small bouquets. Others carried nothing but the weight of the ride. Naomi couldn't move. She just stood there, frozen, watching as the street outside her quiet little diner turned into something she couldn't even explain. Inside, Roy stepped beside her. They came. He said softly, What is this? Naomi whispered. Hank told his chapter, Linda said. Stepping up on her other side, they told others. Word spreads fast in our world. The bikers parked and gathered. They didn't storm the place. They didn't make a scene. They walked in quietly, nodding to Naomi like she was someone they already knew, someone who mattered. Naomi stammered, I don't have enough food for all these people. Roy grinned. Already handled. Trucks are on the way. Everything's paid for. By who? By us. Linda said, Consider it a thank you for showing kindness when no one else did. Naomi blinked back tears. She didn't have words. Just the feeling in her chest that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been alone after all. The diner had never been that full. Every booth, every counter stool, even the space by the walls was packed. Riders leaned against the windows, sipping coffee, chatting softly, waiting patiently for whatever food Naomi could make. Outside, the parking lot overflowed, and the street buzzed with quiet conversation. But then something even more surprising happened. One by one, people from town began to cross the street. At first, they just stood on the sidewalk, watching. Then a few steps closer, Naomi's old classmate, Malik, walked in, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room full of leather jackets and unfamiliar faces. He gave Naomi a small smile. "You still serving those biscuits?" he asked. She blinked, then laughed a little and nodded. "You'll have to share a table," she said. "Not a problem," he replied, sitting down next to a woman with a pink mohawk and a pants that Red Reapers never quit. After that, more locals followed, some shy, some curious, but all drawn in by the feeling in the room, a quiet mix of respect, warmth, and something else changed. Naomi moved from table to table, pouring coffee, handing out plates, taking quick orders. She caught sight of Mrs. Worthington, who had clutched her purse so tightly the day before, now deep in conversation with a biker who was explaining how he restores old engines in his garage. Even Deputy Laura slipped in through the side door, not in uniform this time. She sat at the counter, gave Naomi a quiet nod, and accepted a cup of coffee. No words, just a silent understanding. The diner felt alive again, and for the first time in a long while, Naomi felt it like something broken was finally starting to come back together. Late in the afternoon, when the sun had started sinking behind the rooftops and the buzz inside the diner had softened into something warm and steady, the bell over the door rang once more. Naomi turned, and there he was, Hank Morrison. He looked tired, like the road had taken its toll, but there was a quiet smile on his face that hadn't been there before. His eyes were red, not from anger or weariness this time, but from something gentler. "Hope you don't mind," he said, his voice rough but kind. "I brought a few friends." Naomi smiled and walked toward him. "Not at all," she said. "I saved you a seat." They sat together for a minute, just taking it all in. Then Hank spoke again, voice low. "Jesse got some good news today. The treatment's showing early signs of working." Naomi's breath caught. "That's amazing." Without thinking, she hugged him. He froze for a second, surprised, then hugged her back, firm and real when they pulled apart. He handed her something small, a folded note in shaky handwriting. Naomi opened it carefully. Inside it said, "Thank you for seeing the man, not the jacket. Jesse smiled again today. She can't wait to meet you." Naomi didn't say anything right away. She just held the note against her chest and let it sink in. Everything that had happened, all the risk, all the stares, all the silence had led to this one moment, and it was enough. As the last few bikes rolled off into the evening, and the sky faded into soft shades of purple and gold, Naomi stood at the front steps of the diner. Her apron was still tied crooked. Her hands smelled like coffee and butter, and her feet ached, but she felt steady. The day had been something she'd never forget, not just because of the crowd or the noise, but because of what it meant. People had shown up for her, for each other, for something bigger than old labels and small-town fear. Inside, she hung the note from Hank next to her father's old apron, right above the counter. No fancy frame, no big speech, just a quiet promise to remember. She looked around once more before turning off the lights. Maybe it didn't take a miracle to change things. Maybe it just took one person doing the right thing, even when it was hard. A cup of coffee, a warm meal, a second chance. That was all it really was. But somehow, that small act had opened the door to something much bigger. And in a town that once turned its back on her, Naomi Carter stood tall, knowing that sometimes kindness really could shift the ground under your feet, even if it started with nothing more than a man in a leather jacket in a diner that refused to close its doors.